Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 149. Constellation Banquet. Part 4. Yu Jong-hyuk was next, and he enjoyed an unprecedented popularity. There was even some sound on the second floor when he came out. It felt like I heard the name Eden, so I didn't know how to feel. Yu Jong-hyuk, the best supreme king. Come into our nebula. There was a bit of time left until the story succession. I sat down on the first floor and watched for a while. I had to be wary of all constellations, regardless of whether they were upper or narrative grade. I wasn't looking for reliable people. There was a reason Dionysus told me to trust no one. Thus, I wasn't looking for someone reliable, but someone I could use. Iris approached me and opened her mouth. I could predict what she was going to say. I warned her first, before she opened her mouth. Don't be hasty if you want to survive. Yes, yes? Iris' blank face became astonished as she looked into the air. A few constellations are amazed by your judgment. A few constellations have sponsored you 5,000 coins for the cider. There was a panel on the ceiling that zoomed in on Iris' face. Iris blushed and the watching constellations chuckled. Iris muttered, all that was filmed? It was naive to think the channel would be turned off after entering the world of the constellations. Rather, the constellations' eyes would have shone from the moment we came here as they watched our reactions. Especially those on the second floor. Maybe the reaction of the constellations had almost reached the peak when they saw the confrontation between Iris and I in the waiting room. However, I didn't want to give them pleasure. As I said, I didn't come here to play. At the very least, I didn't want to look silly. Do well next time, kid. I patted Iris' shoulder and got up. Once I moved, the constellations on the first floor reacted. Kim Dokja. Come here. All the constellations on the first floor were in the form of symbols rather than humanoid or biological forms. It was hard for the upper-grade constellations to handle the probability consumption, so they saved on the consumption cost by streamlining their bodies into the simple symbols. At first glance, I couldn't see who was who. Then I saw a bamboo stick and straw and the golden crown of Scylla. Bald General of Justice. And the other? Lady of the Brocade Sleep? Oh. You remember me. That's right. It has been a while. I found the constellations of the Korean peninsula. I wanted to see you once, but to think we would meet like this. The floating eye seemed to be the one-eyed Mithraea. In addition, there was the symbolic body for the last hero of Wangsanbil, King Hunmu the Great. There was Gaibeek. Kim Dokja. I looked back at the voice and saw a 101 coin floating. 101? Who was the 101? It is good to meet you. Who? I'm upset. You don't recognize me? Wait. Who was the person on the 101 coin? Admiral? I asked in a startled manner. My patriotism might be close to zero, but I couldn't help feeling emotional when I saw this person. The coin turned in the air, revealing the figure engraved on the front. It seems like you are using the stigma I gave you. Thank you for that time. The Duke of Loyalty and Warfare, Yi Sun-sin. The person who gave me the Song of the Sword was also invited to this banquet. By the way, why do you look like this? This appearance isn't according to my will. I somehow understood what he meant. Speaking of which, the Duke of Loyalty and Warfare wasn't the only one in the form of currency. I looked at the green paper on one side of the first floor and asked. Then perhaps that person is. Yi Sun-sin nodded. He is the founder of Hangul. Do you know the big golden statue in Gwangwoman? I knew it. I couldn't not know it. Yi Sun-sin continued speaking. The symbolism is according to our most known symbols. Perhaps he is similar to me. I looked sadly towards the founder of Hangul. King Sejong was the 101 note, while Yi Sun-sin was the 101 coin. These great people were confined to currency, and eventually, these became their symbolic body. Then a giggling sound came from the second floor. The constellations on the second floor all had humanoid or at least living appearances. Even the most famous people on the Korean peninsula didn't get a humanoid form. It was hard to imagine how strong these constellations were. I was really lucky to have only hunted Yamada no Orochi's shadow. At this moment, a constellation caught my eye. Who is that constellation? Who? Oh, that person? I noticed a person sitting on the landing between the first and second floors while drinking alcohol. He was armed with a long knife and maintained a humanoid figure instead of a symbol. No matter how I looked, he must be narrative grade. Yet the passing narrative grade constellations were staring at him with contempt. Samyangdang interrupted. Among the upper grade constellations of the Korean peninsula, there is no one above that person. He is upper grade? You might say that he is the strongest upper grade. It isn't due to fame among later generations, but a position he gained from the stories he accumulated. Certainly, if he had enough room to maintain a humanoid body, then he wouldn't be defeated by the narrative grade constellations. As far as I knew, such a presence was only in China. Have you heard of Goryo's first sword? I heard that it was revitalized recently. Goryo's first sword. Don't tell me. I realized that who he was. I wondered why I didn't recognize him instantly. If this constellation was the greatest person on the Korean peninsula, then he should have been the first one to come to mind. Everyone leave. Then there was a disturbance on the stairs. Some constellations who came down from the second floor were coming this way. No one was able to face them. Isunsen sighed. Your popularity is great. They want to take you to the second floor. Yu Jonghyuk was already being led up to the second floor by someone. On the other hand, Iris remained on the first floor and looked at me with envious eyes. Perhaps the story she came to inherit was only from an upper grade constellation. Please take care. As soon as I nodded, the symbol of a constellation appeared. The symbol was in the form of a reaper. I recognized who they were with one glance. The queen is looking for you. They were the judges of the underworld. That reminded me, they were narrative grade. Although they borrowed Persephone's stories to maintain themselves. I was heading up the stairs with them when someone on the landing spat. You are pathetic. Fawning on the guys from the second floor. The judges became furious at the Goryo's first sword's words. Goryo's first sword, what are you saying? Do you want to die? The Goryo's first sword rose from his seat at the judge's remarks. I am ready to die at any time. Shall we fight? The symbolic body of Goryo's first sword was bigger than I thought. No, maybe this feeling didn't come from the size of the symbolic body. This was the size of the status of the constellation. Don't be a fool. Low-life parasites who are barely attached to the end of a narrative. The awe-inspiring aura caused the attention of the first and second floor constellations to focus here. The judges seemed a bit embarrassed but couldn't retreat easily because of their pride. The eyes of Goryo's first sword shone. He seemed like he would take the lives of the three judges right away. He looked beyond them at the narrative-grade constellations acting like nobles on the second floor. Olympus. Eden. Vedas. I don't know why you came to such a small village, but it would be nice if you didn't leave your servants here. The atmosphere of the second floor became intense after his words. No matter how strong Goryo's first sword was, they couldn't endure the taunting of an upper-grade constellation. The moment that the banquet hall was going to be a fight among constellations. Stop. A powerful true voice dominated the entire banquet hall and the atmosphere quickly sank. Judges, don't do unnecessary things. And Goryo's first sword, you shouldn't be too rude. At the cool tone, the judges started guiding me again while Goryo's first sword sat down with a disgruntled expression and started drinking. I looked at the owner of the voice. As expected, it was the queen of the underworld. Persephone's strength wasn't known, but she was the wife of one of the three heads of Olympus for a reason. Perhaps among the narrative-grade constellations who came here today, Persephone was among the top. It's been a while. Kim Dokja. The Persephone I met still looked like Usanga. She was truly a spiteful auntie. How are you? You did something useless in Tartarus. Haha. I shrugged and looked at the constellations around me. It was harder to tell who the constellations were when they had a humanoid body instead of symbolic body. A symbol could evoke the name of a constellation. I could also see the great sage, the equal of heaven, sitting on the second floor. The great sage, the equal of heaven, looked at me for a moment before turning his head away. Was his personality originally like this? After a bit more time, the arrangement of the second floor became familiar and I seemed to figure out the camps. Olympus was based around the central Persephone, Vedas was in the west, and those who weren't in a nebula or were in small nebulae were to the north, including Great Sage, the equal of heaven. Finally, it was easy to recognize Eden in the south. It was due to the wings. An incredibly beautiful angel winked lightly at me. She was an angel, dressed like a demon in the black lace dress. Wait a second. Like a demon? That's right. Was she that angel? I was suddenly curious. Maybe that constellation. Queen of the underworld. I want to ask you something. What is it? Did the constellation called Secretive Plotter come here? Secretive Plotter? Persephone's expression seemed strange for a moment. Then she shook her head. I don't know. More than that, the story succession will soon begin. Have you made a decision? There are a few constellations who want to use your resurrection. I'm still thinking. Of course, there were a few methods I thought of. However, Persephone seemed to read my thoughts. Perhaps you want to reject everyone. It has been like this the entire time. Indeed, this was a favorite statement in my channel. In fact, I wanted to choose this method. However, this choice isn't right. It is because everyone will start a copyright dispute. A copyright over a story? They will claim it was their own. It'll probably be quite painful. Damn, they were complete thugs. Are you telling me to choose Olympus? Persephone laughed. I'm not saying that. In fact, I hate those guys. As it said in Ways of Survival, Persephone had a rather hostile relationship with Olympus. In fact, the Olympus participants at this banquet were only the third generation. Despite this, the constellations of other nebulae were reluctant to approach. Maybe Persephone, to be precise, they were on guard against Hades. Thus, I was unwittingly protected by the underworld. It might be fortunate that the first narrative-grade constellation I met was Persephone. Then Queen Nim, what do you think I should choose? Vedas? Or will it be Eden? Perhaps a different nebula? Persephone shook her head. You will gain an enemy no matter who you choose. In addition, these enemies will be far stronger than any enemies you have ever met. As you can see, the resurrection story forms the basis of the mythology of many nebulae. Accepting one story sometimes means denying another. Persephone licked her lips like she had delicious steak in front of her. Maybe the queen was enjoying this situation. I felt a bit annoyed as I asked her, then what do you want to say? I just wanted to share my thoughts. Think about it. Is it a problem of turning them into an enemy? It wasn't a problem of turning them into an enemy? Finally, a Dakibi went to the stage and opened his mouth. From now on, the story succession will begin. Chapter 150. Constellation Banquet. Part 5. At the beginning of the story succession, 6 small rooms were created at the end of the stage. The number of rooms was exactly equal to the number of incarnations participating in the story succession. All incarnations, please move immediately to the Room of Secrets. The system of the story succession was simple. The incarnations would communicate with the constellations through the Room of Secrets and hear all their conditions. Later, they would go up on the stage and announce the story they would receive. There was a nameplate that said Incarnation, Kim Dokja. I said towards Yu Jonghyuk, I'll see you later. Yu Jonghyuk didn't respond and disappeared into his room. I entered the room and sat at a table, while the sounds from outside were completely cut off. It felt like the space was distorted. The Room of Secrets. It was one of the most confidential places in the star stream. The things that happened here couldn't be seen by even the Dakibis of the channel. You have become the master of the Room of Secrets for 1 hour. You have been given the administrative rights of the Room of Secrets. The maximum time you can use the Room of Secrets is 1 hour. Please make contact with as many constellations as possible in this time. I looked at the door with anticipation. Okay, who would be the first guest? Someone came through the door at this time. It was a floating yellow book with sacred scripture. Incarnation, Kim Dokja. Select the Feast of Resurrection. The first batter was Indian mythology. The constellation founder of humanity is looking at you. The negotiator from Vedas was the constellation Manu, who had the modifier of founder of humanity. I also knew Manu's story. Of course, it wasn't because I knew Indian myths, but because of ways of survival. According to the Indian epic, Manu was the survivor of the Great Flood. In exchange for saving a fish, he was able to escape to the top of the Malaya Mountains in a ship prepared by the fish. I recalled this story and knew why Manu had come to negotiate. Manu was a constellation who frequently argued over the copyright for the Ark's master narrative with the constellations from Eden. In other words, this Manu was a specialist in copyright disputes among the constellations of Vedas. The master of December 25th didn't come directly? Do you think he is that free? Answer simply. Will you accept the Feast of Resurrection? He was coming out with this attitude? In addition, the person in charge of the story, Mitra, didn't come. If you have ears, you will know that Vedas is one of the biggest nebula. A myriad of myths are born in Vedas, and many nebulae plagiarize our myths. Especially those Eden guys. That is a personal story. If I accept the Feast of Resurrection, what can Vedas give me? The protection of the Sun God will be with you. What is the blessing of the Sun God? Do I have to explain everything to you? Insignificant mortal. I have one question. What? Calling me an insignificant mortal, don't you think it is an antiquated cliché? How long will the constellations who love to tell different stories, despite humans with such clichés? Manu's eyes widened and he glared at me. How dare you talk such nonsense? It is what I think. You have used the administrative rights of the Room of Secrets. The constellation founder of humanity has been expelled from the room. At my command, the founder of humanity was surrounded with a pale light and disappeared with a shout. He should have done well when he had the chance. I wouldn't be suppressed by force, even if the other person was a narrative-grade constellation. It might be different after the story's succession, but now I was the one with the advantage. Next. I just finished speaking when someone else opened the door. It was a wanderer with an old crown. Who was this? Incarnation Kim Dokja, join Olympus. These jerks, did they read an Incarnation Kim Dokja manual or something? The constellation poked out his eyes is laughing at you. Poked out his eyes? It looks like you know me. I heard your story when I was a university student. Is that so? How unexpected. A small oriental country. Poked out his eyes. He was King Oedipus, who was taught in liberal arts classes. A person hated by Sophocles. By the way, I've already heard the proposal from the god of wine and ecstasy. You are here to tell me to join the Bacchus sect? Bacchus? It seems that he has already approached. Something felt strange. Persephone attended the banquet for Olympus, while Dionysus told me not to believe anyone. Both of them didn't tell me to join Olympus. Yet King Oedipus opened this door from the very beginning. I'm not here about Bacchus. I didn't even come to exercise the copyright for the resurrection story. In other words, King Oedipus visited me for a reason that was completely different from the other constellations. Maybe this might be the representative of the real Olympus? The story that Olympus will present to you is Lightning Carnival. Huh? I was shocked. Lightning Carnival was the story of Zeus, one of the three leaders. Oedipus saw my expression and smiled strangely. It looks like you also know this story. Yes, you are right. The story we are suggesting is different from the resurrection stories of other nebulae. Why are you offering me this? It is because the three goddesses of fate have caught a glimpse of your fate. My fate. Sooner or later, you will be eligible to inherit the lightning carnival. Of course, you could inherit my story and take the blind prophet, but you are already rumored to be a prophet and won't inherit my story. Wait a minute. What do you mean? Why is my fate? The decision is yours. However, you will definitely need Olympus. Well, until we meet again. Oedipus disappeared from the room. My heart was a bit disturbed. I didn't know what the fate Oedipus mentioned was like, but if the three goddesses of fate were involved, something similar to what they saw would happen in the future. By the way, why was I suitable for inheriting the story of a Greek god? Their stories were inevitably. Hello? Something was about to flash through my head when a person entered my room. There was a fresh and sweet scent. A beautiful angel's face appeared in front of me. The female angel resembled a small demon. It seemed to be Eden's turn. I thought the master of the ark would come, but you came personally. Are you upset that I came? My heart thumped after I heard the voice. Uriel was so cute. Nope, it is nice. I wanted to see you. Kim Dokja. Uriel pulled me into a surprise embrace. Our arms touched and I could feel her skin through the thin silk she was wearing. A demon, this was a demon's touch. It was an open back dress, meaning there was nowhere to place my hands. Uriel rubbed my face like I was a lovely doll and I sighed. I also wanted to see you. Yes, yes. It was a bit embarrassing, but I was glad to meet her. Uriel was a constellation who had been with me since the beginning of the scenario. You are here to offer me the Messiah's path? Ah, right. I came because of it. Uriel raised her head with surprise. It was an expression that showed she didn't remember why she came here. It seemed she was quite pleased to meet me. It must be because you are too handsome. Your words are convincing. Uriel smiled and said, Kim Dokja, will you accept Eden's story? That. I need to think a bit. Why? Our story is the best. It isn't comparable to other places. This was certainly true. The Messiah's path was the best story in the resurrection system. There was one problem. I will lose something precious if I accept that story. Eh? Ah. That's right. If you choose our story, you'll become an eunuch. That can't be. I expected to be persuaded, but unexpectedly, Uriel shook with agitation. Was it such a big deal for Uriel that I would become an eunuch? Why? What to do? If I don't bring Kim Dokja to Metatron, he won't let me use the internet for a month, but if he accepts, Kim Dokja will become an eunuch. When that happens, oh, wait a minute. Perhaps if his position changes. What position? Oh, okay. Kim Dokja. Don't worry too much about this problem. One way or another. Uriel seemed to be filled with great determination on her own. I firmly shook my head. I don't want it. Yes. It is okay if you are an eunuch. Next. After that, many constellations visited me. There were places like Tamna and Gaiac, as well as independent constellations. In particular, the upper-grade constellations of the Korean peninsula gave me a lot of encouragement and didn't want me to establish a relationship with a particular nebula. You are the hope of our world. Please don't bend your will. Their hearts were understanding. The upper-grade constellations who had been suffering from the narrative-grade constellations were envious of me. The negotiation time soon ended. The incarnations went up to the stage one by one. It was time to review the proposed stories and determine which ones they would inherit. Now, let's announce the result of the story succession. First, Selena Kim from the United States. The Dakibi on the stage had the atmosphere of a home shopping host. It was natural. Through this banquet, the Bureau would make a huge amount of coins. Selena Kim has decided to inherit the indomitable Aegis story given by the Last Conscience constellation. Selena Kim has chosen Olympus. Indomitable Aegis was a story appropriate for her as the king's guardian. My brain became more complicated as time passed. No matter what I chose, someone would become an enemy. If I chose no one, there would be even more enemies. Think carefully. The question is who exactly I should turn into an enemy. Persephone said so. I faintly understood her meaning. Maybe Persephone's words were meant for all the resurrection stories. I didn't have only one life, and there were those who would want me to succeed their story in the next resurrection. There was still a problem. Eden and Vedas definitely wouldn't yield the first resurrection, and even if I inherited their story, there would surely be subordinate constraints on them. It was unavoidable. From the very beginning, the relationship between incarnation and constellation was unfair. Wait a minute, fairness. It was finally Yu Jonghyuk's turn to get on stage. The next person is the Supreme King of Seoul. The audience gulped as Yu Jonghyuk moved. In particular, the eyes of the narrative-grade constellations were strange. They were those who wanted to gain Yu Jonghyuk. On the other hand, there were those who showed fear. At this moment, a thought occurred. Then Yu Jonghyuk opened his mouth. Dionysus had told me not to trust anyone. However, that was only if the opponent was a constellation. I had at least one person in this place who I could believe in. I jumped up towards the stage. I grabbed the confused Yu Jonghyuk's hand and raised it high into the sky. I have something to say to you, I said while looking at the audience. The constellations looked astonished. I was able to see Uriel's expression, who seemed on the verge of fainting. I quickly glanced over the faces of the constellations. The reason why the story's succession wasn't fair was because the succession of a story was done in the form of one-sided sponsorship. The relationship between constellation and incarnation was never equal. The constellation Maritime War God is focused on your words. The strength of the narrative-grade constellations differed from the upper-grade ones. Those who were in a nebulae looked down on others. The nebula Vedas is focused on your words. We have decided not to inherit your stories. An enormous silence descended on the audience. Many eyeballs popped out as pressure poured towards Yu Jonghyuk. Yu Jonghyuk stared at me as I held his hand. I grinned at him and told the constellations. We will buy your stories. In order to make an unfair game fair, I had to first make the opponents equal. If you want to sell your stories to Yu Jonghyuk and I, please make a deal with our nebula.